Chapter 29 to 35. Kuroto's mindset at this moment is very good. He knows that at this moment Shue is definitely not going to use Mangekyo Sharingan or any abilities related to it. So, what they would be competing against would be basic skills. Kuroto is sure that he has equal or higher chakra volume than Shue. The Tenseigan are extremely resistant to genjutsu, although his ninjutsu skills are not very apt, they can be compensated with his taijutsu proficiency in Gentle Fist. Therefore, his chances of winning are not small. As Shue slowly approached the training grounds, he did a short courteous bow to Kuroto, and spoke politely, "Kuroto-senpai, let's do our best." Kuroto nodded at Shue's words, and after both made the seal of confrontation. The referee around gave the instruction to begin the combat. The test begins. As soon as the referee's voice fell, Kuroto and Shue subconsciously entered the battle state. The first shot was taken by Shue and instantly he shot about a dozen shurikens. Clank. 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 Some of these shurikens collided with each other midair, changing their respective flight trajectories, either forward or backward, or left or right. As a result, they covered the entire sky towards Kuroto. Although Kuroto has seen Itachi shuriken jutsu skills during their mission together, but again seeing Shue's skills in shuriken jutsu, Kuroto was still stunned. Whether the angle of throw or application of the amount of strength used in each throw is simply impeccable. Even with the Tenseigan, Kuroto can't find any escape route left to dodge the incoming shurikens. Reducing his impetuosity, Kuroto decided to take the action, and at the very next he shot 8 shurikens. Ding! 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 Dang! 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 Suddenly, the impact of the shuriken intercepting each other resounded throughout the examination site. Watching the dazzling shuriken jutsu battle, the Chunin all held their breath one by one. Those who can advance up to such proficiency in throwing skills are naturally regarded as specialized in shuriken jutsu. And this can be clearly seen from the battle taking place on the stage. Look, those shurikens blocked by Kuroto's throw are starting to move again. However, Guy's sudden exclamation said something else. Asuma said with a solemn face, "It's wire string. Shue uses specially treated steel wires to manipulate shurikens. If you don't look very carefully, it is really difficult to find them." The audience also exclaimed, but it didn't affect Kuroto on the stage. Kuroto obviously knows of Uchiha's special shuriken jutsu, so how could he not pay attention to the second stage of the opponent's attack? So when he counterattacked, he already directed his attacks at the wire string that connected shurikens. It's just that these wire string are specially treated, therefore not only are they extra durable, but also very hard to find because of not reflecting any light. Even with the Tenseigan, Kuroto is unable to find them individually moving at such high speed. Additionally, Shue's manipulating skills are also very sophisticated, so after a while, Kuroto still missed a few wire string. The consequence of this small mistake quickly reflected in him falling into a disadvantage. Another mistake is that Kuroto didn't bring too many shurikens with him. He came slightly unprepared because the shurikens weren't available in his stock, and within a few seconds his shuriken stock was emptied. On the other hand, Shue took out a scroll, unsealed it, and suddenly countless shurikens popped out of the smoke. Chained by the wire steel, these shurikens fly up and down in the air forming a network, as if they were illusionary. For a second Kuroto even felt that Shue was manipulating these shurikens telekinetically instead of manually through the wires. Kuroto muttered with a somber expression in his heart, "Can shuriken jutsu even be used with such an advanced mastery?" Off grounds. Asuma shook his head seeing the pressing situation of Kuroto. Kuroto is about to lose. This Shue is, even more, stronger than I anticipated. Guy stared at the two people who were in mid-confrontation and said without turning his head, "Don't be so hasty in making your judgment, they are just warming up, look at them." Kuroto hasn't even moved from his spot at all. As Guy said, as soon as Kuroto realized that just having the Tenseigan alone would not make up the difference in his shuriken jutsu skills, that Shue enhanced and mastered with countless hours of practice, so Kuroto gave up the entanglement of shuriken jutsu decisively and rushed straight towards Shue. Taijutsu combat is where Kuroto is advantageous. Seeing the Kurotos aggressively rush towards him, Shue's fingers moved slightly. His movements were so light and so controlled that all the shurikens flying around immediately shot towards incoming Kuroto. Revolving Heaven. After several months of continuous training, Kuroto has become very proficient in Revolving Heaven, and now he can use it in his combat very easily, anytime, anywhere, any section. Clink. 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 The impact of Revolving resulted in countless shurikens blasted into the sky causing pain in the eardrums of the audience present, and the shurikens that were bounced into the sky flew in all directions towards the audience. Doton, Taju Dorihiki, Earth Release, Multiple Earth-style Wall. Sandem-sama quickly used Earth Release and 4 Earth Walls were erected on the edge of battle range to block the incoming shurikens. The Chunin ninjas watching the battle also retreated 10 meters behind. Among them, Asuma heaved a sigh while wiping the cold sweat from his forehead. These two guys. Guy didn't seem to care, and laughed. It is inevitable to take some risks to watch such a wonderful battle. This is youth. Hi. On the battle range. Not wasting the opportunity that appeared because of him using Revolving Heaven, Kuroto finally approached Shue and shot out a palm strike. The force of the strike was unstoppable as Kuroto used all the strength in that strike. Shue was also not afraid, and immediately pulled out the short sword on his back, and the 3 tomo in his Sharingan were spinning rapidly as he intercepted Kuroto's attack. In an instant, the two starting fighting a taijutsu battle. The movements were so fast that after images started to appear all around. One of the Chunin in the audience was shocked and muttered, "What is up with their taijutsu skills? Is it just me or are they really appearing so weird?" The other Chunin watching the battle agreed and nodded. Kuroto and Shursue's fierce taijutsu battle really seemed a little weird. Their attacks would always stop abruptly midway, often slashing in the midair and suddenly stopping their attacks, or a sudden change of direction of the following attack just after the previously stopped strike. Even after a series of attacks, either of them has yet to make a complete attack. Most of the time, they are repeatedly switching their choice of attack, changing strikes, or forcibly stopping midway, and because they are doing all these actions instantaneously, that in the eyes of bystanders, their taijutsu battle appears really weird. Asuma on the other hand said in disbelief, "So frequent predictions and corrections. Their insight and perception are getting too exaggerated. Is it even possible to have such an advanced battle foresight?" Asuma's words seemed to speak the collective thoughts of the audience, and suddenly everyone came up with an idea. Is it possible to do whatever you want with Dojutsu Kekai Genkai? Sandame Hokage also flicked their eyes and seemed to be thinking about something. The ANBU standing on the side asked softly, "Sandame-sama, they are intentionally competing with their pupil power, right?" Sandame-sama nodded at ANBU's words. He wanted to explain more about his thoughts about this, but before he could, the two on the battle range suddenly separated and retreated to a corner. Such a high-intensity contest of pupil power is obviously a big burden for both Kuroto and Shue, so this kind of weird close combat is difficult to last much longer. Kuroto was panting heavily while taking the support of the ground with one hand. At this moment, his whole body is sore, and his calf is beginning to tremble. If he doesn't take the support of the ground with his hands, he isn't sure whether he can even stabilize his figure. This contest was not just about pupil power, but also the neural control they have over their body. Perception, action speed, reaction speed, and instantaneous speed were all taken into account. The minute changes in their attacks midway put extreme pressure over the muscles of the whole body, so even if it was a very short confrontation, the resulting effect is no less than a whole afternoon training he sometimes does together with Guy. Shue on the other side was in even worse condition. He was sweating profusely, panting heavily, and looked extremely tired. Initially, Shue didn't pay much attention to Itachi's praise for Hyuga Kuroto. It's not because of his arrogance or pride, but he indeed qualified to look down on most of the so-called geniuses in Konoha. But after this series of short confrontation, he experienced it firsthand just how strong Hyuga Kuroto and his Byakugan are. He never thought that he would fall behind someone in the battle of insight and reaction since awakening the Mangekyo Sharingan, but the reality here really hit him hard. Neither of them rushed to get up but took a tacit rest while observing the other party. After a while, Kuroto, who has already caught his breath, stood up first and said, "Let's continue." Shue didn't seem to have recovered completely, but he still stood up and nodded seriously. Kuroto stomped his feet heavily, as a result of which the 2 shuriken were lying around his feet bounced and were immediately caught by him with both hands and thrown towards Shue simultaneously. At the same time, his figure flashed at high speed after the 2 shurikens. He rushed towards Shue. Shue has already faced a disadvantage in a close-quarter taijutsu battle, so this time he didn't dare to let Kuroto close in so easily, and immediately printed hand seals. Snakura Mamonkya Borohorsadager. Katan, Gokakyu no Jutsu, Fire Release, Great Fireball Technique. As soon as Shue shouted, a huge amount of flame was released from his mouth and took the form of a sphere, almost covering the entire battle range. Seeing the fire sphere rushing towards him, Kuroto had no choice but to use Revolving Heaven again as a counter. The battleground now became a big stove, and it was a stove with a fan no less. Kuroto's use of Revolving Heaven broke the fire sphere, as a result of which the entire training ground was now on fire. The ninjas watching the battle were thankfully less affected because of the earth wall Sand-Im-sama created, but they still had to occasionally dodge the blazes of fire, and finally, everyone had to back up to a more distance to be able to watch the battle safely. On the battle range, Kuroto, who resisted the Great Fireball technique, was also a little uncomfortable. Revolving Heaven is a technique used to mainly counter taijutsu attacks. When used to defend against ninjutsu attacks, its effectiveness is greatly reduced. Therefore, although Kuroto somehow managed to block the effect of the Great Fireball technique used by Shui, he still had to use 3 times or possibly 4 times the chakra that was used in the fire release technique itself. Even if his chakra volume is higher than Shui, such an exchange ratio is really unbearable. Fortunately, after blocking the fire release technique, Kuroto was already very close to Shui. Shunshin no Jutsu. Body Flicker Technique. Knowing how horrible Kuroto's close-quarter taijutsu skills are, Shui ignored the body fatigue and used the body flicker technique without any delay. Accompanied by Shui's voice, more than a dozen Uchiha Shui appeared around Kuroto. As soon as he saw Shui use his signature technique, Kuroto immediately stopped and didn't rush madly. He scanned around all the Shui around him with the Tenseigan, but for some reason every image of Shui appeared original, making it extremely difficult for him to distinguish between them for a while. Kuroto doesn't have much knowledge about Shui's body flicker technique, but he knows of the title, Shunshin no Shui. Since Shui can become famous with his alias as Shui of the body flicker, it simply explains just how pedantic his skills in body flicker technique are. At this moment, more than a dozen Shui spoke in a unison voice, "Kuroto-senpai, I'm going to attack." The words sounded like a series of echo sounds from all the direction, extremely difficult for Kuroto to distinguish the original source. As soon as Shui's voice fell, a storm of attacks followed. Kuroto was having it really difficult because of being besieged from all directions by more than a dozen Shui. He didn't even get the chance to defend properly, and more than a few stab wounds appeared on his body. As a last resort, he had to use Revolving Heaven again and barely block the siege he was facing because of Shui's body flicker technique. After achieving a short respite, Kuroto finally had a short opportunity to observe the body flicker technique of Shui. After continuous observing, Kuroto finally managed to have some understanding of it. The body flicker technique of Shui under his extremely high velocity and mobility allows him to leave behind multiple tangible after images that could strike with actual force, making it extremely difficult for the enemy to resist. But in the final analysis, the body flicker technique is also a taijutsu skill, and as long as it is some taijutsu technique, except for some forbidden ones, Revolving Heaven is impeccable in dealing with them. After realizing this, Kuroto no longer took the initiative to attack, but chose to defend. In a battle of chakra consumption, he definitely has an advantage over Shui. And so, a battle of one-sided attack and one-sided defense began. Shui's attacks were not going through the defense of Revolving Heaven. After blocking a series of rapid attacks numerous times, Kuroto wiped off the fine drops of sweat from his forehead and said, "If only up to this degree, can your signature technique be effective on me?" Shui also noticed this, and he decisively stopped the body flicker technique and finally spoke while heaving for breath, "Kuroto-san, I am unable to match you, I concede, I lost this battle." "What?" Kuroto uttered in shock. He was taken aback by Shui's sudden acknowledgement of defeat. Obviously, he didn't expect Shui to admit defeat so easily. Shui smiled helplessly at Kuroto's shocking reaction and explained, "My chakra is almost exhausted, and it seems to me that Kuroto-san still has quite a lot of chakra, so even if we continue as it is, I will lose eventually." Looking at Shui's tired face, Kuroto suddenly realized. The awakening of Mangekyo Sharingan although provided a qualitative improvement for Shui, and improved his combat effectiveness and chakra purity, but didn't help much in the physical aspect of his strength. Rather, awakening a Mangekyo at such a young age is being a burden for him, as it is most likely affecting the ratio of Yin nature chakra and Yang nature chakra. Therefore, long-lasting fights aren't Shui's specialty, at least for now. After all, awakening a Mangekyo is an abnormal mutation of the Kekkei Genkai, and the natural essence of Sharingan is quite unstable because of its negative nature. Unless the user gains the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan, it will remain a double-edged sword for the awakener, and the more frequently it is used, the greater the burden it will cause to the vision and body of the user. This also gives Kuroto some understanding as to why Shimura Danzo dared to attack Shui. The first reason is that the Mangekyo causes a lot of burden to its user, so if Shui is fighting he will subconsciously avoid using the Mangekyo. The second reason is that he initiated the attack using, "in the name of the village" or "for Konoha," to justify his actions, which subconsciously suppressed Shui's intention to use a killing blow against Danzo. After all, no matter what anyone might say, but if the Uchiha Shursui really attacked Shimura Danzo with the intentions to kill, then for the Shursui with techniques Koto Ematsukami and Susanoo at his hands, Danzo was nothing more than an upper jonin, and if Shursui chooses to put away all his scruples and decided to use all his methods, let alone Danzo, even killing Sandem-sama wouldn't have been a pipe dream. After all, he only needed to use Koto Ematsukami once and the Elder Council would have disappeared. Although Kuroto felt a bit unpleasant, he knows Shursui wouldn't be using Mangekyo Sharingan abilities here, which is similar to how he wouldn't be using Rain Wheel and Keikage's puppet. What's more, if Shursui really did take out the big guns likes of Kato Ematsukami and Susanoo here, Kuroto is quite sure he can't resist them without going all out, so without worrying too much, he calmly accepted the victory. After forming the seal of reconciliation, Kuroto walked off the battle range and was immediately surrounded by Guy, Asuma, and other chunin around. Guy happily congratulated, "Congratulations Kuroto." After winning this round, Kuroto's promotion to a Tokubetsu Jonin was now official, so Guy congratulated him in advance. Asuma glanced at Shursui in the distance, and whispered to Kuroto, "I was right to have thought that Shursui has a well-deserved reputation. Except for you, I am afraid, close to nobody here can defend his body flicker technique." Guy also raised his head and agreed with Asuma's words, I thought for quite a long time, but I couldn't figure out a way to defend against this technique. Shursui's body flicker technique is so fast, his kenjutsu skills are also off the charts. I am afraid if I have to fight against him, then without relying on Hachiman Tanku I don't stand a chance." Listening to the praises he was getting from all around, Kuroto thought silently, to some extent, with the Tenseigan does restrain the Sharingan of the Uchiha clan. Firstly, the Tenseigan is extremely resistant passively to normal genjutsu, even if it is cast by the Sharingan user. This fact alone greatly suppresses most of the Uchiha specializing in genjutsu. Secondly, with the powerful insight provided by the Tenseigan, I am almost immune to Uchiha special shuriken jutsu, which again makes me almost invulnerable to the Uchihas with mastery in shuriken jutsu. And lastly, because of the evolution of the Byakugan to the Tenseigan, and the awakening of all the 33 genetic sequences, my growth in chakra volume has also surpassed most of the Uchiha of the same generation, therefore I have a lot of tactical advantages over the Uchiha because of higher chakra level. Of course, these advantages only lie over the normal Uchiha with 3 Tomo Sharingan. If I have to compare against the Uchihas with the Mangekyo awakened, it would be really hard to say whether my Tenseigan could withstand the Mangekyo dojutsu techniques, at least at this point. Breaking out of his thoughts, Kuroto just smiled at Guy and Asuma who were still discussing Shursui's body flicker technique, and said, "It is undoubtedly true that Shursui is the most genius Uchiha of this generation, and besides Itachi who is still very young in terms of age I am afraid hardly anyone can match him, so him having such strength is quite normal, don't worry too much about it." Asuma nodded at Kuroto's words but his face remained gloomy. Guy laughed heartily, "Ha ha ha, there is one more goal I have to catch up to." Asuma was speechless by Guy's optimistic attitude. What is there to be so happy about it? Guy patted Asuma on the shoulder and showed his white teeth while laughing happily. The passionate competition between companion is the real youth. You have to work hard, Asuma, or you'll be left behind in the dust. Fending off Guy's hand that was patting his shoulder, Asuma looked at Kuroto, then glanced at Shursui in the distance, and finally stared at Guy, left behind. "Ha! Don't underestimate me." After speaking this, Asuma turned and walked away to the side angrily. Guy didn't care about Asuma's anger and started looking around eagerly, muttering to himself, "When will it be my turn? My blood is rushing, I can't wait to fight." After the staff cleaned and repaired the damage of the first battle range, the assessment continued. Guy and Asuma performed well and successfully defeated their opponents, each receiving a valuable spot in the Tokubetsu Jonin ranking. After a series of more rounds, 15 winners were quickly decided, and with the emergence of these 15 winners, the Tokubetsu Jonin assessment officially came to an end. Although Uchiha Shursui lost to Hyuga Kuroto, but because of his off-the-charts strength and impeccable performance, he also won an extra special spot and was successfully promoted to a Tokubetsu Jonin. Regarding Sandem-sama's decision of promoting Uchiha Shursui to a Tokubetsu Jonin, under special consideration, none of the other candidates expressed any opinion. This is because everyone witnessed the battle between Hyuga Kuroto and Uchiha Shursui, and they all know that Shursui is overqualified for the rank of Tokubetsu Jonin rank, but it was just his bad luck to have been pitted against Hyuga Kuroto that resulted in his loss. After the assessment was completed, Hokage-sama stopped Hyuga Kuroto, Might Guy, Sarutobi Asuma, and Uchiha Shursui behind. While exhaling a puff of smoke from the tobacco pipe, he examined the 4 Tokubetsu Jonin, and spoke quite frankly, the 4 of you are some of the most excellent shinobi of your generation, you all are also the future pillar strength of the Konoha village, therefore, to further enhance your strength and experience, I hope you can accept to join the ANBU department and become the cornerstone of the village to protect Konoha from the shadows. Konoha is in really dire need of a new generation of shinobi with high strength. Hyuga Kuroto, Might Guy, and Uchiha Shui did not hesitate for a moment and immediately agreed on the spot. Each has their respective reasons and objectives to accept this opportunity, but the ultimate goal is still the same. However, that's not the case for all the 4 present here. Unexpectedly, Sarutobi Asuma, the son of Sandame Hokage Sarutobi Hiruzen, clearly expressed his opposition to the idea of joining the ANBU unit. He folded his arms over his chest and said, I don't want to become a sneaky guy in the shadows. Hokage-sama frowned at the unexpected answer from his son, and spoke coldly, what nonsense are you talking about? Sarutobi Asuma, who is in his rebellious teenage period, and has his daddy issues, was not afraid of Hokage Otosan. He coldly swept past Kuroto, Guy, and Shui and shouted at Hokage-sama in a loud voice, I will prove to you that I am no worse than anyone here. After declaring this, he shook his head and left the office before anyone could react. Asuma is not an idiot but in fact is a truly perceptive person, at least as a strategist he is a genius, so after these few rounds of assessments, facing the opponents in each round being exactly weaker than him, he realized the tricks being used to make him qualify as Tokubetsu Jonin. Although Kuroto might believe that there's nothing wrong with this, but Asuma on the other hand who has got his daddy issues can't stomach the fact according to his self-esteem that he is promoted because of the political influence of Hokage Otosan. And he also realizes that he is not strong enough to fight against the likes of Hyuga Kuroto and Uchiha Shui, and he can't guarantee his win even against Might Guy, so choose to leave with disappointment. After Asuma's little trouble, Hokage-sama didn't have any interest left to continue to say anything, he just briefed the 3 about the whole process of being recruited into the ANBU, and then turned and left. Being exhausted for the day, Kuroto rejected Guy's proposal to celebrate their promotion and returned home alone. But as soon as he entered the house, he found the one-eyed viper sitting right in the corner of his room, hissing his tongue. After taking out the note from the viper's mouth and looking through it, Kuroto burned it immediately, following which he changed into everyday clothes, and went to a specific izakaya in the village. Going up to the 2nd floor, he entered a single reserved room and said to Orochimaru, who was calmly resting while sipping sake as if he was in his daddy's laboratory, Orochimaru-sama, it could be very dangerous sneaking into the village in the broad daylight. Dangerous. Orochimaru smiled contemptuously, the Yondaime and the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki are no longer in Konoha and the old man is all-time busy with the official and political affairs of the village. The village is far less dangerous for infiltrating than it seems. And indeed, Orochimaru is damn well correct. There are not many Kage-level shinobis in the village and after the death of Yondaime-sama, hardly anyone in Konoha could pose a threat to Orochimaru who is a Kage-tier ninja himself. Whether it is the Toad Sannin Jiraiya or the Sandame-sama himself, they would be resistant to using full force when fighting against Orochimaru because of their long-term kinship and master-disciple relationship. Not to mention him being almost unkillable, cockroach-like tendencies. So, although Konoha at this time seems to be heavily guarded, for the likes of Orochimaru, who is extremely familiar with all the secret passages and routes of the village, coming to Konoha is like taking a walk in his backyard. Thinking all this in his head, while resisting the oppression of being in Orochimaru-sama's presence, Kuroto asked respectfully, in that case, what did you need me for? Orochimaru stared at Hyuga Kuroto for a while and finally spoke, oh don't be so hasty, how was the Tokubetsu Jonin ranking up assessment? Kuroto's face changed slightly when he heard Orochimaru mentioned about Tokubetsu Jonin rank up assessment, but he controlled his emotions and replied respectfully, everything went smoothly in the assessment, Sandame-sama arranged for me to enter the ANBU unit. Kuroto was really surprised at the fact that Orochimaru knew about the test as soon as it was finished, this obviously meant that he had more than one spy in the village working for him. Orochimaru put down the sake cup, stared at Kuroto with a very scary expression, and asked, Kuroto-kun, your recent growth is somewhat out of my expectation. Is there a secret you are hiding from me? Or is there some kind of discovery in the research of the Byakugan that you would like to inform me? Hyuga Kuroto's strength has improved exceptionally in a very short period, those who don't know him any better might not find this very strange and think of this as him entering a period of rapid growth. After all, Kuroto is at an age where his strength should increase rapidly, similar to Might Guy, Sarutobi Asuma, Hatake Kakashi, etc. Strength continuously improves with the passing of days and it changed every day. But Orochimaru is different from everyone, as he knows the person Hyuga Kuroto quite well, at least more than anyone out there possible. Orochimaru knows that the shinobi Hyuga Kuroto isn't of the kind with the unusual talent to match the likes Hatake Kakashi or other ninjas who are considered to be real geniuses, so Kuroto's recent performance and his rapid growth aroused Orochimaru's curiosity. Kuroto knows that he can't hide his changes from Orochimaru, but he wouldn't admit it, so he shook his head. The study of Kekai Genkai cannot be done overnight. I believe you are aware of this fact more than anyone. As for the question of hiding something from Orochimaru-sama, I don't believe I am capable of doing that. Orochimaru squinted non-committal manner at Kuroto's response. Really now, Kuroto-kun? Orochimaru knows that Kuroto has only participated in the research for a few years. It is unlikely to have obtained impressive results and discoveries at such an early stage. Moreover, he has also checked Kuroto's laboratory, which mostly contains the basic genetic testing data involving in vivo testing. Imagine not even having any living subjects to conduct experiments on. How can one obtain test and research results? Of course, Orochimaru didn't know that Kuroto had already done a very lively test, and the subject of the test was himself, so naturally, he wouldn't find any proof of test subjects or any data collected. After thinking for a while, Orochimaru smiled and said, "It seems that I didn't notice it before. You not only have the potential to become a scientific researcher but also have the potential to become an excellent shinobi." "Thank you for your praise, Orochimaru-sama," Kuroto stated courteously. As if suddenly remembering something, Orochimaru again smiled and said, "I recently met an interesting guy, and he asked me for your information." "Who?" "The S-class missing nin of the Sand Shinobi Village, the Sasori of the Red Sand." Not removing the eye contact with Kuroto, Orochimaru asked word by word, "Have you had some encounter with him?" Kuroto nodded calmly, unfazed by the pressure Orochimaru was putting on him. There was indeed an encounter. Obviously, during this period the S-class defected ninjas like the Snake Sannin Orochimaru, the Sasori of the Red Sand had joined the Akatsuki organization successively, and Orochimaru, one of the three Sannin, is a natural target for Sasori to inquire information related to the shinobis of Konoha village. Kuroto had already expected this to happen, so he didn't show any surprised or unnatural look but agreed calmly. Observing no change of expression on Kuroto's face, Orochimaru continued, "He seems to want to kill you pretty badly. What did you do to attract his hatred?" Kuroto believes that with Sasori's pride, he will not reveal the details of his encounter with Kuroto or the fact that he lost Sandaime Kazekage's puppet to Kuroto, so Kuroto briefly described the cleansing action Konoha authorities conducted but omitted the details of the accidental victory of Sandaime Kazekage puppet from Sasori's hands. After explaining it all, Kuroto smiled with fake nervousness. A mere chunin somehow managed to escape from him, maybe this wounded his pride. Hearing Kuroto say this, Orochimaru showed a rare laugh, which surprised Kuroto. Can Orochimaru also laugh naturally? Kuroto thought silently. What Kuroto didn't know was that although Orochimaru and Sasori temporarily formed a team in Akatsuki, they weren't really getting along well. Although both are addicted to achieving immortality, one is taking the path of mechanical and non-biological technology, while the other is taking the path of medical and biological technology, and both of them have reached the threshold to achieve it in their respective fields. It is conceivable that the differences in their scientific views will lead to occasional ideological conflict. After laughing for a while, Orochimaru said, "Although I didn't give him any information about you, he must have some other source of information too, so you have to be careful. He is a paranoid person. I don't want to see you becoming part of his puppet collection." Kuroto replied with a bitter smile, "To have the attention of such a strong person on myself is definitely not a pleasant experience." And some more discussion between Orochimaru and Kuroto continued. The Uchiha clan grounds. Seeing Shursue's figure coming back, Itachi, who was hovering on the side of the road, hurriedly greeted him. "Shursue-san, how did the assessment go?" Shursue replied while stroking Itachi's head, "Well, it did go pretty well, I suppose." "So Shursue-san, are you now a Tokubetsu Jonin?" Itachi was overjoyed when he heard Shursue, and immediately asked, "What were the judging criteria? Tell me quickly." Shursue was also not reserved and talked about the interesting and incident during the Tokubetsu Jonin assessment. Itachi listened carefully to all the details, then suddenly asked, "Shursue-san must have easily defeated all the opponents, right?" Shursue's face became a little stiff at Itachi's questioning, and he shook his head slightly. "In the final round of the assessment, I lost to my opponent, but Hokage-sama felt that I performed well and allowed me to be promoted to Tokubetsu Jonin." Itachi was surprised. "Lost? How is this possible?" Shursue is the most genius shinobi in the Uchihas. He has earned this title based on his track record. And it is already believed that Shue possesses the strength of a Jonin, and this information has been recognized as a fact by the Uchiha clan, so it never occurred to Itachi that in the assessment for being promoted to Tokubetsu Jonin, someone could beat Shue. Look at you being so shocked, in fact, even I didn't think I would lose. With a helpless smile, Shue continued, you also know the person who defeated me, and he is Kuroto-san of the Hyuga clan. Itachi suddenly muttered, Kuroto-san. Since a very young age, Itachi has the keenness and wisdom beyond that of ordinary people. He who is an extremely observant person can always find some details that other people don't pay attention to. Because of this, the last time when he encountered Cloud Village's team, he was able to notice that Kuroto-san was not afraid of the Nibi's Jinchuriki. At that moment, he was able to deduce that Hyuga Kuroto was definitely not any run-of-the-mill chunin. While Itachi was processing the information he has of the person named Hyuga Kuroto, Shue continued with a solemn expression, there is an endless stream of strong individuals in the ninja world. We must never be blinded by the power of the Sharingan. We must always remain humble and polite, being prideful is not wrong, but we must not develop arrogance in our character. Itachi seemed to understand what exactly Shue is referring to, he nodded seriously. Looking at the people passing through in the distance, Shue asked in a low voice, what is the first thing you see in them? Itachi observed carefully and said with some sadness in his tone, pride. Yes, they are prideful for being born in the Uchiha clan. After a short pause, Shue continued in a deep voice, but this pride has turned into arrogance, and when that happens a person becomes too much unbearable for those around him. In the previous battle with Kuroto, not only didn't use the Mangekyo Sharingan, he also had some reservations in going all out even only basic combat skills. The reason for that isn't only because he is aware of the village's suspicion of the Uchiha clan, but also because he clearly felt the undercurrent surging within the Uchiha for the past few months. Even the other shinobi villages know about the lack of power Konoha is facing currently, not to mention the Uchiha clan who lives in the village itself. There has never been a lack or ambitious people within the Uchiha clan, but until now there were too many strong people in the village, such as the Sannin, Yandem-sama, the Kyubi's Jinchuriki, Sandem-sama, etc., so the Uchiha could only choose to stay silent. But now that there is no news of the slug Sannin, the defection of the snake Sannin, the death of Yandem-sama and the second-generation Kyubi's Jinchuriki in the aging or Yandem-sama, coupled with the suppression the Uchihas are facing because of the suspicion, so the ambitions of many people that were silent until now have started to break out irresistibly. Shue wasn't to do anything to put oil in those already burning ambitions with his actions, all he could do is try to contain it as much as he can. Therefore, when put against Hyuga Kuroto in the Tokubetsu Jonin assessment, he chose to concede defeat quite early. This is one of the methods he chooses to destroy the ambitions of the Uchiha clan. Shue's emotional words made Itachi lost in thought. He was naturally aware of the undercurrents surging within the family. He could already vaguely feel the contradiction between the Uchiha clan and the village even when he was much younger, but he could not do anything about it. After a moment of contemplation, Itachi wanted to say something but stopped. Shue-san, if the news of your loss to Kuroto-senpai spread, I'm afraid. It's not just the suppression from the village that the Uchiha clan was excluded from the village. It can be said that most Uchihas are not very easy to get along with. The main reason for all this is that once Uchiha's people open their dojutsu Kekai Genkai, their strength will advance by leaps and bounds with the awakening of their Kekai Genkai, and eventually they will grow into Jonin pretty easily. This is almost an inevitable fact. It doesn't take them too extraordinary effort to gain power above others. Over time, it is natural for them to develop a sense of superiority over others. Therefore, Itachi was very worried that after the news that Shue, the most genius of the Uchiha, had lost to Hyuga Kuroto, the unruly individuals in the clan would definitely go to seek trouble with Hyuga Kuroto. This is not unprecedented. Shue smiled, I know what you are worried about, but you can rest assured that Kuroto-san is stronger than you or I might think. Itachi immediately understood the purpose of Shue, so he was even more curious about the battle between Shue and Kuroto, and hurriedly asked, tell me about your battle with Kuroto-senpai. Shue recalled the previous contest with Kuroto and said slowly, I never thought that Kuroto-san, who had been so unknown before, has higher Jujutsu power than me. Hey, every time I think of such a genius is so low-key, but I was repeatedly called the most genius by the Uchiha clan, enjoying the envy and admiration of the companions in the village. I really felt ashamed. After shaking his head and sighing, Shue described the process of the battle again. Both Genjutsu and Taijutsu are almost ineffective against him. Upon hearing Shue's view of the battle, Itachi lowered his head and muttered to himself for a while, and then he said again, Kuroto-senpai is so strong, it seems that I have been worrying too much for nothing. Shue recalled something now, and said, I also had a feeling during the entire time I was fighting him. Itachi asked, what feeling? Kuroto-san seems to know that I didn't use my full strength in the battle, it seems as if he... Shue wanted to say that he had a feeling that Kuroto seemed to be aware of the fact that he had awakened Mangekyo Sharingan, but he quickly shook his head and drove this kind of absurd idea out of his mind. At present, there are only two people that are aware of the information that he has awakened the Mangekyo Sharingan, and those two are none other than Shue, himself, and Itachi, and Shue believes that Itachi is more than sensible enough to not reveal this secret to anyone. On the other side of Konoha village. Private room, second floor, Izakaya. Izakaya on the second floor. After talking about his encounter with the Sasori of the Red Sand, Kuroto thought for a while, and tentatively asked, Orochimaru-sama, do you know about the tail beasts? Orochimaru was a little surprised by Kuroto's sudden question, you are interested in the tail beast? Is it because of the Nibi Jinchuriki you met not long ago? Kuroto did not hide it and naturally nodded, due to my lack of talent, my chakra has never been sufficient enough. To solve this problem, I read many books and materials and conduct some research, but the final answers all point to the tail beast. Orochimaru smiled softly, it seems we are quite similar, aren't we? You two will do whatever it takes to get the answer you are looking for, but I'll give you a piece of useful advice, don't touch the tail beasts, they are more troublesome than one might think. Kuroto quickly said, tailed beasts are the secret weapons of the 5 great shinobi villages. Of course, I won't do anything to harm their interests so ignorantly. Therefore, I came to another conclusion, and I wanted to ask about it from you Orochimaru-sama. Ho! And what conclusion did you reach? Orochimaru asked with some curiosity. Is it possible to artificially create something akin to that of a tailed beast? Now this question drew Orochimaru's interest. Seeing the positive change in Orochimaru's expression, Kuroto immediately explained his idea of making an artificial tailed beast to him. With Kuroto's current knowledge reserves, it is absolutely impossible to be able to create an artificial tail beast. If he wants the zero-tailed artificial tail beast to come into existence in advance, he must rely on the power of the Orochimaru, the second best researcher in the shinobi world. As for why not the best? That question is very easy to answer. The best is already dead. Naidame Hokage-sama Senju Tobarama in Kuroto's belief was the best researcher in the shinobi world. Moving that aside and coming back to the discussion. Surprised by Kuroto's thinking, Orochimaru was again taken aback for a moment, and then said in a hoarse voice, Kuroto-kun, you really are different from others, you are a person full of ideas and imagination. Kuroto looked at Orochimaru expectantly, is it possible to realize this vision of mine, Orochimaru-sama? After thinking for a while, Orochimaru said in a deep voice, in fact, the Konoha village has been studying the tail beast since the time of Shodai Hokage-sama's era of power. Until the Naidame Hokage-sama came to power, the Tail Beast Research Project has always existed. But then I don't know why, the project was suddenly called off, all the research data was sealed, and the Tail Beast Research Project was completely suspended. Kuroto who heard this and thought in his heart, the village really has studied the Tail Beast in the past. In fact, since he met Shino, Kuroto has been trying to figure out from which village did he possibly stole the technology to artificially create a zero-tailed tail beast. Among the 5 great shinobi villages, the political situation of the village hidden in the mist and sand has always been unstable, and their military strength is also not very high. Therefore, it wouldn't be wrong to say that they simply do not have the ability to conduct in-depth research on the tail beasts, and this fact is clearly visible from their unstable Jinchuriki. So, these 2 villages can be eliminated. As for the village hidden by the rocks and clouds, does focus on comprehensive research, but their focal point of research is the development of earth release and thunder release plus taijutsu skills respectively. Although Cloud Village has some understanding and research of tailed beasts because of Turtle Island and the inheritance left by the clan of Ginkaku and Kinkaku that were distantly related to the Sage of the Sixth Path, this is clearly visible from the fact that Cloud Village has perfect Jinchuriki, but Kuroto doesn't believe they have enough research resources and researchers that can conduct artificial tailed beast research. Therefore, Konoha is the only village that had both resources and methods to conduct tail beast research. The presence of Shodame Hokage-sama with his wood release alone made it possible to suppress the tailed beasts, coupled with Naidame Hokage-sama's scientific interest and scientific psychology most likely made such comprehensive research quite possible. Therefore, Konoha is the only village from which Shino could have obtained research results about the artificial tailed beasts. This is the reason why Kuroto believes Orochimaru is the most likely person to be able to give him some data on what he is looking for. Converging his divergent thoughts, Kuroto asked promptly, so what made the research to be suspended? Orochimaru replied, although I don't know the specific reason, as much as I can guess, it was probably because of the unstable nature of the artificial tailed beast. I did check some information on this topic, and all the data states that the probability of the tailed beast running away is very very high. There is no suitable method of sealing or suppression, and once the tailed beast runs away, it will be a total disaster. Therefore Sandaime probably put a stop to this research. Kuroto once again put forward an idea. What happens if we abandon the attack ability of the tailed beast and just use it as a chakra battery? Wouldn't that improve its stability? Orochimaru glanced at inquisitive Kuroto, and said in a guiding tone, the accumulation of a large volume of chakra itself has quite the destructive power, and there is no such thing as abandoning the attack ability. I tried using similar assumptions that you're thinking in my early years, but it didn't work accordingly. Therefore I reached a thesis, according to which, to improve the stability of the artificial there is most likely only one method, and that is, using only one chakra source to create the artificial tailed beast. Additionally, the source of chakra shouldn't be too aggressive in nature. Kuroto frowned upon hearing Orochimaru's thesis. Then according to this theory, in terms of single chakra source except for the tailed beasts themselves, close to nobody can act as a source of chakra for supplying the artificial tailed beast. Exactly, in the ninja world, perhaps only Shodaime-sama can supply chakra to the artificial tailed beast with his own power. Anybody else, including Nidaime-sama, probably doesn't have enough chakra volume to meet the criteria. After a short pause, Orochimaru continues, moreover, as I mentioned previously, the source of chakra shouldn't be aggressive or violent by nature, else the artificial tailed beast might run away, which again eliminate all the natural tailed beast, as their chakra is extremely violent by nature since there was no suitable source, so probably the research project was abandoned. Upon listening to Orochimaru's thoughts on the matter, Kuroto tried thinking about everything from the memories of his previous life, hoping to find some answer to this seemingly unsolvable question. He can vaguely think of several people, who have an extremely large amount of chakra, but these people are all extremely strong standing at the pinnacle of the ninja world, but no one of them would suitably work for Kuroto as a source of chakra. Excluding these useless people, Kuroto also thought of the two extremely mysterious places with extremely large energy sources. First is the Ryumayaku, Dragon Vein, of the ancient city Rorin in the Kingdom of Wind, and second is the Morio sealed in the Land of Demons by the Witch of the Land of Demons. Kuroto wanted to mention the Ryumayaku and Morio to Orochimaru, but after considering that it would be difficult to explain how he knew these secretive and highly classified pieces of information, Kuroto hesitated, and finally chose not to speak. And taking a look at Orochimaru, he seems to have no interest in artificial tailed beasts. However, this is also quite normal. Chakra volume is not a problem for Orochimaru, who has mastered Furo Fushir no Jutsu, living corpse reincarnation, and the secret technique of physical regeneration and is now developing the Edo Tensei. After weighing all the information he has in his hands, Kuroto finally asked the million-dollar question, Orochimaru-sama, could you tell me what will it cost me to get information about artificial tailed beasts from you? Orochimaru looked at Kuroto with interest. I'm curious Kuroto-kun, why are you so attached to the artificial tailed beast? Is there any specific reason you would like to share with me? Who knows, I might share the know-how of its research without you paying me anything. Obviously, Kuroto won't reveal his true intention. The first rule of negotiation is, never reveal your true intentions, only then can you get benefit from it. Therefore, Kuroto didn't answer directly, but asked a question in return, then why are you so fascinated by the Kenjutsu, forbidden technique? As you said before, you and I are the same type of people. To research something, do I need to have a specific reason? It's just a matter of interest. Orochimaru patiently waited for Kuroto to complete his speech and then spoke, although what you speak is indeed true, but your explanation isn't enough to convince me. After shaking his head while staring at Kuroto, he smiled slightly. However, I also wish to see what kind of monsters can you make, and what you become. So, this time I'll excuse your request. Kuroto was obviously overjoyed upon hearing Orochimaru agree. So you agree? However, Orochimaru didn't answer Kuroto's question but stretched out two fingers. I will give you all the information, but there are two conditions. Please speak. Orochimaru smiled and said, first, I want you to share the research results with me. Second, I want you to collect information on all the members of the ANBU unit, including Old Man's shadow guards. The manner in which Orochimaru spoke was not conditional but like an order. This obviously meant Kuroto didn't have any other choice or any room for bargaining, so he nodded and agreed. After some more discussion, Orochimaru got up and left. On the night of the same day, Kuroto got all the information about the artificial tailed beast stored within a sealing scroll from the mouth of the one-eyed viper. Seeing the scroll in his hands, Kuroto can infer that Orochimaru had stolen most of the forbidden technique and research material from the archives before defecting from the village, and this may also be a reason why the village senior officials carried out a bloody cleansing of Orochimaru's former subordinates. Unfolding the scroll recording the data of the artificial tailed beast, Kuroto just glanced slightly and frowned. The complexity of the research articles and the experimental data about the artificial tailed beast is beyond all his previous expectations. The research states that there are more than 700 kinds of complicated fuinjutsu techniques involved in the process, many of which are sealing techniques that would be difficult to perform even for the likes of elite Jonin ninjas. Additionally, the artificial tailed beast has unusually high requirements for the type of material used for its core body. According to the data, the village has conducted tests using 17 different types of material, of which only one material, namely purple clay, could barely carry a huge volume of chakra. Purple clay is a special product of the Numa no Kuni, country of swamp. It is a special type of clay soil found in the deepest part of the swamps. Because of its source, purple clay is difficult to mine, so the overall output is quite scarce. As a result of this, the market price is equivalent to gold, which is a very rare and expensive metal. Kuroto had the idea that only obtaining a large source of chakra would be the problem in creating an artificial tailed beast, but after learning this information, almost everything from the source of chakra to the material for the core body is a problem. It's no wonder that even Shino, who controls the remaining military power of the Land of Sky, also took so many years to finally be able to create Zero Tail even if it was in the incomplete state. After sighing with disappointed emotion, Kuroto shook his head and put away the scroll. With his current means, it is simply a pipe dream to be able to create an artificial tailed beast, whether it is the suitable materials required or the necessary fuinjutsu, sealing technique, knowledge, or the most important of all funds to carry out research and experiments. He lacks it all, so Kuroto doesn't have any option but to temporarily give up the artificial tailed beast project. After clearing all the thoughts, Kuroto went to sleep, as he was mentally exhausted by the series of events that took place today. Early the next morning, Kuroto rushed to the ANBU office. After going through the complete recruiting procedure, he received his new ninja ID. Now he was officially a Tokubetsu Jonin of the Konoha village, and at the same time, he was also an ANBU working directly under Hokage. In the equipment room, Kuroto met Might Guy and Uchiha Shue. After greeting each other, the three of them carefully selected the equipment for each of them. When it was their turn to choose the mask, Kuroto tried an eagle-faced. It felt just right, so he opted for this mask. Guy chose an ordinary dog-face mask. Shue appeared confused between a kitsune and a Nico mask. In the end, he gave up the kitsune mask that appeared deceitful and opted for a relatively docile Nico mask. While all this was going on, there was one thought that seemed to really confuse Kuroto, and that was how come Might Guy selected in ANBU. Kuroto is clear than anyone that the person named Might Guy, with his straightforward and honest-to-boot personality, lacks the necessary darkness needed to be an ANBU ninja, and this fact should also be very clear to Kakashi and Sandem-sama too. Even then they decided to select Guy in ANBU's squad. This is something that Kuroto can't comprehend, and in fact he can remember from the memories of his previous life, that although Might Guy tried to join ANBU to accompany Kakashi and help Kakashi overcome the darkness, but was eventually rejected by Sandem-sama himself, using the same reason, so how in the hell is he now a part of ANBU? Honestly, Kuroto could only sigh at such unpredictable changes in the story. It most likely is his influence, because he can't think of any other possible reason for this to happen. Putting away the unnecessary thoughts, Kuroto followed Shue and Guy to exit the equipment room. Hokage office. Hyuga Kuroto, Uchiha Shue, and Might Guy, who had now changed into their official ANBU costume, stood upright in the presence of Hokage-sama. The Sandem-sama observed the three recruits carefully for a while, then nodded in satisfaction and said, "Yes, all three of you appear very energetic. I believe you all will retain this vigor. Now before being officially becoming a member of the ANBU Black Ops, you three will have to undergo a recruitment test. If you three pass the test successfully, then you'll undergo ANBU special training. Let's call your team Temporary Recruitment Class 11 until it becomes official." After saying this much, Sandem-sama clapped lightly. Following the sound of the clap, a figure fell beside him. Hokage-sama introduced, "He is Kitsune. I believe you three knows his identity. He will be the captain of your temporary squad and also the proctor for your test." Kitsune took off his mask and indifferently introduced himself, "Hatake Kakashi, pleased to meet you all." Following Kakashi's gesture, Kuroto, Guy, and Shue also took off their respective masks and introduced themselves one by one. "Now come that matter of your recruitment task." Hokage-sama knocked on the table with his tobacco pipe for attracting the attention of the 4 teenagers, and continued, a few days ago, the witch of the country of demons sent a request to the Konoha village, hoping that we would send some shinobi to help seal a demon from another world. The detailed mission information is in this scroll. This will be a semi-ANBU mission. That means you all wouldn't be acting as ANBU, but Kakashi would be responsible for judging whether you 3 are qualified to join ANBU. The mission rank is S-class. Good luck. When Kuroto heard this, his heart almost froze. Not because of the so-called recruitment test or something, but because just yesterday he thought of the Morio of the Land of Demons as a possible chakra source, and today Hokage-sama has assigned a mission to help the witch of the country of demons seal the said demon. Kuroto didn't know if it was just a mere coincidence or whether the village authorities have learned of the detail about his artificial tailed beast plan. Not paying any attention to the 3 recruits, Sandim-sama stood from his seat, turned around, and looked at the village from the window of his office. After a momentary daze, he continued, while on the mission, the 4 of you will operate as a team of a Jonin captain and 3 Tokubetsu Janmi ninjas, not as a member of ANBU Black Ops. It is highly likely that you'll encounter the shinobi of the other great villages too while on this mission. Try to extra careful and operate in such a manner to avoid any unnecessary conflict with them. Yes. The 4 shinobi nodded in unison. That is all. Disperse. With Hokage-sama's final order, the 4 shinobi left the Hokage office. The time was short and the task was urgent. None of the 4 delayed any longer and left the village and rushed to the country of demons, after preparing the required equipment and material supplies in the shortest amount of time. As soon as the 4 left the village, Guy excitedly spoke while rushing toward their destination. Kakashi, my eternal rival. I am finally close to catching up to you. Kakashi replied feebly, yes, yes. Guy didn't notice Kakashi's impatience at all, or even if he did, he probably chooses to ignore it. Kakashi, chasing after companions and growing together is the real youth. When I think of this, I feel so full of energy. Kakashi turned his head and slightly glanced at Hyuga Kuroto and Uchiha Shue behind the team while continuing to deal with Guy's antics. Behind, realizing that Kuroto seemed to be a little upset, Shue asked curiously, Kuroto-san, is there something wrong? Kuroto shook his head slightly, nothing. Right now, Kuroto's mind is highly focused on figuring out a certain possibility, and that is his suspicion on the village for being given this mission. Kuroto is indeed a little suspicious over this mission. Just yesterday he met Orochimaru and discussed the artificial tailed beast plan, and although didn't mention Morio but still thought of it as a suitable chakra source. Is it just a coincidence to be sent to the mission of sealing Morio the very next day? However, he did all the brainstorming all he could, and it seemed that the witch of the country of demons did pass away around this time, leaving behind her only daughter Cheyenne, as the next generation of witch who was about the same age as Naruto. In Kuroto's impression, based on the fact that Cheyenne was around the same age as Naruto and that her mother Miroku, the witch of the land of demons before Cheyenne, died sealing Morio to protect her daughter, and based on the mission details it seems that now is that time, but it is this coincidence that makes Kuroto feel more uneasy. Seeing that Kuroto was still worried about something, Shue decided to divert Kuroto's attention towards some other thoughts and asked, Kuroto-san, what do you think of this mission and recruitment test? Kuroto, who was busy storming out his brain, answered casually, the land of demons is located between the Wind Nation and the Earth Nation. This time the objective of the task involves a demon from the other world, therefore the High Priestess will most likely seek help from Sand Village and Rock Village too. As such, the mission will definitely involve the participation of multiple shinobi village. In short, it will be very troublesome. Shue asked a little curiously, hey, I don't know what kind of monster that demon from the foreign world would be. Kuroto thought about it a little and decided to reveal some information he knew about Morio to his teammates. According to my guesses, the demon should at the very least have the chakra level to match that of a tailed beast, otherwise, Hokage-sama wouldn't classify this task as S-class. Tailed beast level. After a moment of contemplation, Shue whispered to Kuroto in a low voice, Kuroto-san, I have a short-term countermeasure against the tailed beast, but I am afraid that after using it, I will temporarily lose my combat effectiveness. Kuroto was taken aback by what Shue said. Obviously, Kuroto knows that Shue with his Mangekyo Sharingan has a short-term countermeasure against the tailed beast, but he didn't expect Shue to reveal a hint of this information to Kuroto, at least not at this early. They don't even know each other for too long. Is this trust, or is it his naivety that eventually led him to be betrayed at the hand of Shimura Danzo? Kuroto spoke solemnly after a short silence. When we were duking it out yesterday, I already had a feeling that your Sharingan is different from the normal Sharingan. Hearing Kuroto's solemn answer, Shue seemed hesitant a few times. It appeared as if he wanted to say something, but he still had a lot of concerns. Upon noticing Shursue's internal struggle, Kuroto smiled and spoke, "You don't need to explain it to me, everyone has their secrets, after all, these secrets are also what makes people unique in a way, as long as your intentions are not harmful to the village, your secret will remain safe." Shusue sighed in relief upon Kuroto's comforting words and said sincerely, "Thank you, Kuroto-san." Kuroto waved his hands nonchalantly, "It's no big deal, actually I also have a few secrets, in fact, I too have a secret technique in my arsenal that can hold off against the tailed beasts even if for a short duration." What Kuroto spoke is not nonsense. Sandame Keikage, known as the strongest Kazekage, has the ability to suppress a chibi with his magnet release, and since Sandame Kazekage puppet is in his hands, he naturally has some ability to contend against a tailed beast class strength, even if only for a short time. Upon hearing Kuroto say this, Shusue smiled slightly and said, "Sure enough, I always felt that you didn't use all your strength in yesterday's battle, Kuroto-san." Sharing one's secrets is undoubtedly one of the best ways to get closer to each other. After only a short discussion, the friendship between Kuroto and Shusue improved a lot. Of course, this is also related to the fact that both of them are members of the noble clans, and shinobis with dojitsu kekai genkai, therefore their situations are much similar than it may seem, and as the saying goes, birds of a feather flocks together. The front end of the team. Kakashi turned his head back after observing Kuroto and Shusue talk for a while and said to Guy running beside him, "Kuroto seems to have become exceptionally stronger in the past few months." Guy smiled hearing this, "You're saying? He isn't inferior to your genius talent." Yes. Kakashi dropped his head and said nothing more. After being traumatized by his father's suicide, then one after another death of his friends and teammates Obito, Rin, and finally his teacher Minato, Kakashi has become a depressed, indifferent and silent person. Very occasionally would he say more than a few words, that too only when he is with people he would consider as a friend. The four members of Team 11 are all outstanding ninjas from Konoha's new generation of shinobis, and their speed of traveling is naturally amazingly fast. In just 1 week, they crossed the border and entered the land of rain. In a cave. The four, Kakashi, Guy, Kuroto, and Shusue sat around a small bonfire while analyzing the next route. Between the land of fire and the land of demons, there are several small nations such as land of rain, land of birds, and the land of bears. At present, there are several rebellious ninjas hidden in these small countries. If they aren't careful in the choice of route to take, then encountering a fierce battle wouldn't be so surprising, which isn't something they could afford due to the urgency of the task, therefore they must be cautious in selecting the most optimum route. After a while of discussion, Kakashi, who has marked the route, put away the map. At this time Guy whispered, "The weather of the land of rain is really bad, it rains all day long, making the environment really humid and sticky." As the captain of the team, Kakashi dutifully explained, although the land of rain is small, it also has its own shinobi village. The demigod, Hanzo of the Salamander, is the leader of the rain village, so we have to be extra careful while passing from the rain country. Both Guy and Shusue nodded seriously at Kakashi's words. Hanzo of the Salamander is a known figure throughout the shinobi world. The title of Sannin was granted by Hanzo himself. Kuroto leaned against the drywall of the cave and pondered to himself, based on the timeline, Hanzo should have been killed by Nagato by now. Sasori and Orochimaru joined the Akatsuki successively not long ago. This implies that the Akatsuki has transitioned from the time when Yahiko was the leader to the stage with Nagato in power. As far as Kuroto could remember, after Nagato became the leader, the first thing he did seemed to be avenging Yahiko's death and taking control of the rain country from the shadows. And following Yahiko's death, Nagato no longer cared about good or evil, right or wrong, compared to Samorio that only ravaged the land of demons and its surroundings. The Akatsuki organization under Nagato's power was a group of real monsters, hidden in the ninja world, with the ability to destroy all the shinobi villages. Thinking about Hanzo, a powerful shinobi known as the demigod, died so silently, Kuroto couldn't help but feel cold sweat down his back. Hey, shinobi world is really very sinister. After passing through the land of rain without encountering any surprises and dangers, Class 11 also passed through land of birds and bears quite smoothly. Class 11 thought that everything went well up to now and they would soon be able to meet High Priestess of the Land of Demons, but unexpectedly as soon as stepped into the lands of demons, trouble started coming at their door on its own. Boom! Loud sounds echoed throughout, and the sky was filled with clouds of dust and smoke. Guy retreated suddenly seeing this and shouted, "Damn it, we are a little late, what to do about these monsters?" At this time in front of the four shinobi of Class 11, was an army of stone soldiers moving at ghostly will. These ghost army should be the brigade of stone soldiers serving the demon Morio, the rush towards Class 11 with aggressive steps. Kakashi used Chidori against a few of the stone soldiers. Guy used Konoha Dezenpu to kick away a few of them, but without any damage. These stone soldiers stood up again and started coming after the four. Seeing their attacks being ineffective, Kakashi frowned. These seem to be unbreakable. Kuroto also doesn't have much knowledge about these stone soldiers, but anyone with a discerning eye can see that these stone soldiers are nothing more than an army of soulless puppets acting under the orders of someone else, so he suggested, there's no need to waste any time here on these puppets. I would be best to meet with the High Priestess first. I think she should know what to do with them. Regarding the current situation of Land of Demons, all four of the class 11 have no idea, therefore everyone agreed with Kuroto's proposal and rushed to the Temple of High Priestess bypassing the slow-moving puppets in the hinterland of this country. Along the way, everything they saw or heard was all about stone soldiers raging in this country. Not just some small villages but even the large towns have suffered. There is a very high casualty count among the civilians, shocking the four ninjas who have experienced the third shinobi war not long ago. Although shinobi are trained to become emotionless, they still couldn't bear to see such loss of life. Still, they grit their teeth and increased their speed because the four of them knew very clearly. Rather than wasting time here entangling with these puppets, it's better to meet the High Priestess and find a method to solve the one controlling them in one go, otherwise, the victim count will keep on rising. Fortunately, the Land of Demons is not a very big country. After just a few days of high-speed traveling, they arrived at the Temple of the High Priestess. If you like this content, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you later, bye bye.